Dear participants, let me introduce our next speaker for this session. So we have like 15 to 20 minutes. Uh, we are honored to have Dr. Imtiaz Sifat from Sunway campus, Monash University, Malaysia. He is a former Hazana Yunus Center Asia Scholar. He has overly a decade of experience in trading in financial markets. These days, research constitutes his major passion. He has extensively published in areas such as conventional finance, risk management, and is considering his future research agenda towards fintech, climate risk, and sustainable investment. Dr. Imtiaz, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Okay, please go ahead. Over to you.
All right. Thank you so much for the invitation, Dr. Mohsin, and everybody else. So time is limited, so I'm going to try to rush through this as much as possible and then potentially take questions. I noticed that a lot of the questions that the students asked are quite interesting, and I also have some thoughts on some of those, especially question asked by Mr. Amjad Ali. So we'll try to get to those. But for now, let me tell you the structure that I want to adopt. I'll go through Scopus, which is the premier destination for research search engine, and then Google Scholar, and the third one would be some of the nuances or differences between Scopus and Google Scholar, when to use what is the pro and con of each of those. So as most of you are familiar, Scopus is an indexing service. It is part of the Elsevier Group, which is a very large publishing company, very old, from the Netherlands. So if you log in using your institutional access or some other access that you have, if you go onto, here I'm using the access from Lancaster University. So if you log into Scopus with your credential, you come to this landing page. So usually you have an option of doing a basic search or an advanced search. I would encourage you to use an advanced search. Yeah, advanced search works here. So when you go into Scopus, I would encourage you to, instead of using the basic search, to click on the advanced search. Now, this is the string that I encourage you to use the most, title-apps/key. So this basically means that whatever search query that you're entering into the search engine will look into the title of all the publications, the abstract, and all the keywords. So these are the keywords which are provided by the authors. Some of you may already have some writing experience. If you've published in a conference paper or maybe a journal article, you would know that you have to provide some keywords associated with the article. So this key looks into all of those, which is a very convenient way of finding out relevant papers. So in this example, because most of you are in the field of media and communication, I'm trying to take a sort of a neutral approach, albeit controversial, but a neutral approach to the content that I want to cover. So let's say if we want to search or if we want to write some article on the sentiment expressed by media on a critical issue of, let's say, the Kashmir issue, which is a contentious issue on both sides of the border. So what you notice here is I can try to make a very simple search result based on this. If I want to search only on media sentiment, this is all I need. Search for media sentiment and you get a host of results, 8727. So that's a lot of results. We want to narrow that down further, customize that a lot more. So how do we do that? We will make use of these operators, and, or, and, not, etc. Usually the and one will be very good for you if you want to look into the, let's say a critical analysis of that or a critical review. So you want to look into, let's say, critical review. So some sort of a media sentiment and critical review. This makes the search field more narrow. Now you see that only 60 documents which include these keywords. But now we don't have a geographical notation. We need to narrow that down further to the countries of interest for us. So for now, we add another and. So let's say if you want to look at it from the Indian point of view, you put in India. And you will see that it will narrow down further. So narrow, in fact, there's only one paper in the entire Scopus database. So this doesn't work for us. This is too little. That's because we have been too restrictive in our criteria. There are ways that we can expand this even more. So say, for example, there are going to be some articles which look at it from the Pakistani point of view, which would obviously include some, Indian views as well. So we can expand this further by making this India portion further enlarged by using, let's say, Pakistan and India. So now we're searching based on 3 different blocks. The first block is media sentiment. The second block is critical review. The third block is Pakistan and India. So now, okay, so this will probably be too restrictive, and I'll show you why. See, no result came in. That is because when you use the and, that means that both of these conditions have to be satisfied. But instead, if you use or, sorry, it has to go here. If you use or, then it looks for articles which deal either with Pakistan or India. So this should lead to more results. Okay, it didn't just one, so it turns out there are no other studies related to that. So one of the reasons that these things will happen could be because there might be papers which, instead of using the term Pakistan, they might be using Pakistani or Paki-related or something like that. Instead of India, it might be Indian. So if you want to expand that even more, what you can use is use some wildcards. So the asterisk sign here is a wildcard, which means anything that contains the term Pak and anything else. So it can be Paki, Pakistani, Pakistan related, Pakistan issued, anything like that. Similarly, you can do the same thing for, let's say, India. And if you want to add some more country, let's say if you want to add some Bangladesh, so you do something like that. So it will look into this entire string. Anything that satisfies, it will lead into those results. So hopefully, yeah. So from 1, we now have broadened our result a little bit further. Another thing I want to mention here is, as you can see, we have 3 blocks. Block 1, block 2 is critical review. Block 3 is the geographical notation. Now you see in block 2, we have the critical review. Now this is just something that I came up with as an example, but papers might, instead of critical review, they might say critical analysis and in-depth analysis and in-depth review, something like that. So it's better for us to be a little bit more liberal on this one. Instead of having, let's say, review, or we can say analysis or critique. They're all basically the same thing. So we're trying to cast a wider net to catch more fish, so to speak. So let's see what results come up now. Before we had, when we were too restrictive, we only had 1, and then we had 3. Now we have 273. So this is something that we can work on a lot more. Say, for example, if you want to work into with a SAARC or a South Asian perspective, this is something that would come in handy for you. So now we need to be a little bit more specific. If you want to study on papers which are very recent, as the previous presenter mentioned, 3 to 5 years, you can customize them on the very recent papers. The authors, I don't think that's necessary. So most of you are media and communication studies students, so computer science and engineering, let's assume you don't need that. You need more from social sciences. Sorry, I'm not selecting those. Social science, decision science, you're more interested in those. We don't want conference paper. We only want peer-reviewed articles. So we want that. We don't want anything that is in press. We want final. So we choose all of those, and we create a limitation that gives us a more solid, more discipline-specific, and more customized result. So we have all these 18 documents that we can work with. Now we need to save them as well in order to be able to work on them at a later date. So we click on this all thing here and then export. You can choose from a variety of formats. I personally choose the Excel one, or if you want to use Mendeley and you want to integrate the citation, you can also use Mendeley. So here you get to choose what kind of information you want. So whether it's open access or not, I don't care. Source and document type, volume issues, EID, I don't want those. Say, for example, I don't want the author's ID. So I export like this, and a CSV file will be exported. As you can see, I have an option for an Excel file. So this is a basic way of doing that. Because time is short and I want to move on to Google Scholar, I will give you a quick recap of what we just did. So after all the strings that we have attached to our original 3 blocks of media sentiment, review, analysis, critique based on Pakistan, India, or Bangladesh, and after all of those things that we clicked, you can see that this is the text-based visualization of that thing. So you can manually edit all of those or not, or you can simply delete those and start fresh. Instead of media sentiment, you might say media criticism, or if you want to look into how the media is treated, or let's say your current Prime Minister Imran Khan is criticized or praised or not, you can modify them in such a fashion, so on and so forth. So to remind you, the basic building blocks are based on and, or, and not. Okay, and not, I didn't mention this. And not means that you are excluding something. So say, for example, if I have, let's say, in case you only are interested in India or Pakistan, you don't want result from Bangladesh, if you put and on, it will make sure that any paper that mentions Bangladesh does not turn up in the query. So this is another nice way of filtering your result. Another important thing to remember is this wildcard asterisk, which gives you more, allows you to cast a wider net. Any different people use different keywords. Some might say Paki, Pakistani, etc. Or instead of in our field we use finance. So some papers have financial instead of economics. Some might say economy related or econometric. So we use econo or econ and then put an asterisk, which allows us to catch all of those. So this is a basic breakdown on how to use Scopus. So now I'll move on to an example using Google Scholar. Now, Google Scholar is the best way of conducting research. The reason I did not show this at first is because at your level, most of you are students and are not professional researchers yet. Therefore, it is difficult for you to distinguish between the quality of the peer review that the papers or the articles have gone through. Therefore, when you're searching from Scopus, you can rest assured that you're looking to articles or research which has undergone a rigorous process of filtering and checking, double checking, rechecking. So that allows you, you can rest assured that these are good papers. You're building your research on a foundation of solid works. But on Google Scholar, it's free for all, everything. Google trawls through everything on the net and catches everything. Even sometimes you will see, website articles being caught by Google Scholar. So let's say media sentiment and stock price, something that I study. It's just an intersection of my research and what do you guys study. So say, for example, we found a lot of papers here. So we can see that this one paper has 367 citations. So this allows you to easily identify the milestone papers like the previous presenter mentioned, or as we call them, the seminal papers, the papers which essentially define the genre or define the discipline. So these are papers that you can easily identify, quickly, visually identify from Google Scholar. And one thing that I do in my own research is I actually track the people who are basing their research on this main research. Now, I can see that a large majority of you guys are Muslims, so this example would work with you. You would never trust someone who calls themselves a Hadith scholar if they've never studied Bukhari or Muslim. It just, it doesn't make sense. Similarly, in our field, if someone has not studied Fama, French, or Miller Modigliani, we would not consider them scholars at all. So if the sentiment analysis on social media, if this is a milestone paper, all the future papers, good quality papers, must cite or base their research based on this paper. So if you track this father paper or this mother paper, you can find out all these other branches which are important and relevant to your own research. So this is a trick to remember. Find out those milestone papers and then look into their citations. So this one with 367, let me where was it? Okay, this one. So Google Scholar allows you to search through the people who have cited this paper. So say, for example, in this case, I'm only interested in papers which have studied, let's say, Malaysia, which is where I'm living now. So this would give me all the papers which deal with social media and stock prices, but have an element of Malaysia in them. So now this gives me a very narrower number of papers, which is I think about 30 papers or 20 something papers. So this is a lot more topical for me. You can similarly look into it by changing it to Pakistan and see how many people have studied, Pakistan for this. Now, you will notice that when I wrote Pakistan here, I put this into a double quotation. Double quotation means that I'm telling Google the term Pakistan must exist in these papers, keywords, or in the text of the body. If I don't do it like that, Google would not be so strict. If I do it without the quotation marks, this will lead to a higher number of results. But if I put in in inverted quotes, this means that it is a lot more restrictive, that it's non-negotiable. I'm not going to compromise on this element. Okay, so I think I've already gone through the 15 minutes allocated to me. I'm going to give you, a quick recap. So the terms about Google that I really encourage you to do is to identify those milestone papers. You can do them very quickly, and you can visually look into them without, sorting through all of those things. Of course, you can define custom range if you only want to look into papers which have been studied in recent times. Let's say from 2016 onwards, the last 5 years. You can also do those. You can sort them by date, etc., or sort them by relevance, which means you're looking more into the citations. So usually within the first one page, you will get to find all the milestone papers, identify them, branch out. Treat this one like the main tree, like the mother tree, and then you can slowly branch out and narrow down your search patterns further to get what you're interested in. So that's a brief overview of Scopus and Google and what to use, which one to use. My advice would be to use both of them. Start off with Scopus, export the papers that you've identified, and then add Google Scholar as an add-on to make sure that what you've done from Scopus is just not wrong. In Scopus, we usually are more biased towards the recent papers, very, very quick to see the recent papers. But in Google, usually the most seminal works, the most important works immediately come out. So Google allows you to expand your search criteria furthermore. Okay, so I think it's better for me to move on to the question and answer session. So hopefully that will allow me to address some specific queries from the audience. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Imtiaz, for such an amazing talk. Let's take some questions from the participants.
Okay, sure.
I think Dr. Abdul wants to say something.
Yes, AG, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Imtiaz, for a very wonderful session. I don't have any specific questions, so I was very happy to get some insight. There were a few things that I was not really sure about that, like when you give them specific like Pakistani and Pakistan and these keywords. I mean, that was especially new for me. As a researcher, I think that is that would be quite helpful for the new researchers. Mm-hmm. So thank you so much for this information. That was quite new for me.
Sure, you're welcome.
Please.
I want to ask one question about reference management. Which reference manager would you suggest first, Mendeley, EndNote, or something like Zotero? Because different people, different researchers give priority to different reference managers.
The short answer is whichever you're comfortable with. I personally, I'm very bad at EndNote. I use Mendeley, and I know, Abdul Ghafoor and myself, we also collaborate on projects. I usually tell them that you can take care of the EndNote. If I work on Mendeley. So choose one, stick with one, and I think it's okay. In the end, it does not matter because both the softwares allow you to export in each other's formats. So cross collaboration is not an issue.
Thank you. I'm doing my doctoral at UM in engineering in particular. Okay. I have a question. As you mentioned in your talk that one of the significant papers can quickly be tracked through the number of citations that they have with them.
Yes.
But I'm of this confusion that there would be a certain amount of time that would require a paper to make an impact. But how can we track the same for some recently published significant article? Thank you.
Yes, that's a very good question, and this is also connected with what Amjad Ali asked before. I'm not sure if he's here or not, or whoever else asked the question about gray papers. So for my discipline, this is something discipline specific. This is what I do on Google Scholar. Maybe I should share my screen again and see if I can do that. Yeah, so I have alerts on Google Scholar, especially the people who are experts on the topic. So this way, when they come up with something new, which you know for sure, I don't know any famous people in your field, but in our field, the top 4 or 5 scholars that we follow, whenever they come up with something new, we immediately jump into that. And because you're in engineering, I think a good idea for you would be to track those conferences. This is also, we also do this in our own discipline. Look for those big scholars and what they publish in those conferences, which are usually ahead of the journal articles. And the other one would be to look at the speed of publication as well. This is something I personally do. No one has taught me, so be careful if you implement this strategy. If you see that a paper that has been published in 2021, let's say in the beginning of this year, if it already has 20 citations, chances are it's going to go very far. So this is, measuring the velocity of citation, which I don't think is a proper metric yet, but it needs to be, because we are trying to identify, as you mentioned, the impactful papers before everybody else jumps on them. So that would be my suggestion. And another question which was regarding gray papers. Now, I personally, my entire research career is based on gray papers. If something is already out in the news, it is already very hard for us to make a positive impact. It will just be a copycat research if we were trying to change one parameter here and there and pretend that we're making a contribution. Real contribution, in my view, my personal view, comes from citing those gray papers. So in engineering, you might want to look into arXiv. I also look into arXiv. For those of you in social and media studies, looking into SSRN, the Social Science Research Network. Good news is Social Science Research Network is also owned by Elsevier, which owns Scopus. So this makes it easier for you to cite those as well. SSRN papers already have DOI numbers associated with them. So if you go to SSRN, you can easily search on all of those. You can cite those using DOI. And the issue about what Anis mentioned and the gray papers is, this is going to sound like a silly example, but think of it. When Sir Isaac Newton sat underneath that apple tree and the apple fell on his head, his first reaction was not, I need to make an apple helmet, and a helmet that can save me from falling, apples or falling fruits. That was not his thought process. His thought process was much more fundamental. Why did it take place? So in a sense, a lot of the research that we do is like the apple helmet category, that the apple fell, okay, so we need to make a helmet. Someone else comes in and say it has to be on a carbon-based sustainable material, carbon fiber. Another person says no, it has to be aluminum. And then there's a big debate and everyone jumps in. Let's study apple helmet. But that is not a beneficial research for society, or does not help solve society's problems. Finding out how the apple fell, why apple fell, is what made Newton Isaac Newton. So in a sense, he did not have any citations to build upon. He looked into the necessity of the problem, concept of the underlying issue, and then he built it, by himself. So, that's why I strongly encourage looking into gray papers, regardless of your discipline. The finest ideas will be there. Do not worry about the citation. If you get it from SSRN, SSRN also does a preliminary review of that. So that would be also, quite good.
Hi, Imtiaz. I'm just taking the opportunity to ask. Just share one thing. If you can. It would be great if you can highlight some pros for using SSRN platform for the working papers.
Okay.
The new research.
Yeah. The short answer is everything that I showed on Scopus applies on SSRN. It is just a sister company of Elsevier. So everything applies. All the, and not, it's the same platform. So you can use the same strategies as you would use on Scopus.
Thank you, Dr. Imtiaz, for all the explanations. My query goes about Web of Science, because I'm mostly using Web of Science instead of Scopus and Google Scholar. And the reason why I'm using it is because I was looking for the high quality papers. So especially for my dissertation, because I'm majoring in higher ed. Yeah. So is that idea applies also for Scopus and for Google Scholar?
Yes. The reason I mean, to put it bluntly, it's also a commercial game. Scopus, Web of Science, these are large companies which are trying to, selling these subscription packages. Web of Science used to be more restrictive before, when they used to be known as ISI and only had these SCIs, Science Citation Index, SSCI, etc. Nowadays they have extended with Cite extended or ESCI, Emerging Sources Citation Index. So this allows a wider range of coverage for higher education. It's completely okay for you if you use that one. The reason Scopus is more relied upon is if you're researching on something from emerging economies where there's not a lot of established research on. It's very easy if you're studying something on Europe or in the US, you will find a lot of material. But Scopus just has a wider coverage. So that is number one, a wider coverage. And then the second part comes in to filter the quality. Is this, as the previous presenter mentioned, is it credible or not? Something you can trust or not? Just think of going to a doctor. You would trust, if your father needs to have an open heart surgery, you would trust a surgeon who has fantastic credentials, right? You don't want to take any chances. So the similar thing applies, looking into, filtering down based on the reputation of the author, their where they work, what their track record is, etc. So in short, it's okay. Web of Science, the same thing would work there.